Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for the Art of Collaborating Internationally. I'm Evangeline Ciupek. I'm from the Florida State University's Office of Research, and I am pleased to provide this webinar in partnership with FSU's International Education Month. You can learn more about International Education Month here. There are still a few more events going into the month of December, and I encourage you to check those events out. It's an amazing thing. That's a cross-university effort, and I especially want to take this moment to thank Assistant Provost Dr. Stephen McDowell and Kelsey Klopfenstein at FSU for coordinating this month of events. And we at the Office of Research are thrilled to continue our partnership by providing international related workshops during this time. So today's webinar will begin with each panelist introducing herself and what brings her to this conversation today. After that, we'd like to move into a more informal conversation and time for questions from the audience. So when we come to that point, feel free to type your question in the chat or raise your hand virtually or physically, and you'll have the chance to unmute yourself and ask your question that way if you prefer. Also, as you'll see in our participants list, my colleague Rachel Goff-Albritton is graciously serving as tech assistance for the webinar. If you have any technically related questions today, please feel free to message her in the chat, and she'll do her best to assist you. Thank you so much, Rachel, for being a part of this today. So with that, we'll go ahead and get underway, and I'll introduce our first panelist, who is Dr. Svenja Wolf, Assistant Professor of Sports Psychology in the College of Education, Health, and Human Sciences. Her current research centers on the intersection of group dynamics and emotions in sport and other performance contexts, such as performing arts and high-pressure work settings. She previously worked as a visiting professor at the Technical University of Munich in Germany and spent 2 years as an assistant professor in the Work and Organizational Psychology program at the University of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. She completed 2 postdocs, including one in the social psychology program at the University of Amsterdam and one with the School of Kinesiology at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada. Dr. Wolf, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, and thanks for having me part of this panel. As you can already tell, a lot of the international collaboration is just part of my a life and research story, and that's really why I was super excited when you reached out, because I enjoy international collaborations a lot. I benefit from them, and yeah, if there's any way we can make this more attractive or accessible to any of you, I think that'd be really nice if we're able to do that. In addition to everything we've heard, I'm also, and I think we'll hear a lot about that, but I'm also not a native US American. I'm actually from Germany originally. So that's kind of where my journey started. And then I've been going a little bit back and forth. And that's really also been more incidental that I picked up these international collaborations. So instead of seeking out international collaborators, I've been kind of going places and just people stuck with me as I moved on to the next place. And that's really been such a pleasure, because if you think globally, really, you have the chance to seek out experts in your field, experts in your area of study, and really work with those individuals, because odds are, if in your department or maybe even in your country, not necessarily you have the same level of expertise on what you're researching. And I find that to really be, yeah, just such a treat to be able to talk on that level of expertise with other individuals. And I think that's really where depending on what you're doing, but I really benefited from having that international reach in terms of collaborations. I'm still collaborating with people I met during my postdoc. I'm still collaborating with my colleagues from Amsterdam. I'm closely collaborating with former colleagues from Munich. And in fact, I'll be flying out tomorrow to Australia to see one of the colleagues from there who's now a postdoc at the University of Queensland. So also, a kind of fun side project is that if you have close collaborations across the globe, you can go and visit, and sometimes even research pays for that. So I do think that's just something that often comes naturally if you're really mobile. But maybe we can also speak a little bit to kind of how to set this up if you're not necessarily moving from one country to the other. And for my personal journey, it literally has always started with an email. When I wanted to spend some time abroad working in Canada, I literally sent an email to the prof who had published one of the studies in that area. And the same in Amsterdam, where I knew the lab was very knowledgeable on emotions, hadn't done any work in sports. So I kind of reached out and pitched a sport angle, and they were interested in it. So I guess like that's my number one advice right off the bat, like really about that. And I think all of us, we would be super flattered if we get a genuine email that people are interested in our work and would like to have a conversation about it. And especially with all this online technology, it makes it so much easier. Still need to navigate time differences, but really otherwise like having that conversation. So I guess that would be my advice, like don't be shy to reach out. I How collaborating internationally is maybe a little bit different from collaborating nationally, might be cultural differences. And some of my research does focus on group dynamics. So I'm like, I know a lot about teamwork and roles and role clarity and how important communication is. And that does not mean I'm always doing this right. So I've definitely also experienced kind of the challenges that come with these international collaborations. And maybe we'll have a chance to get into that a little bit more. But there's definitely just like little things like the importance of author order. In Germany, it's once you get more senior level, you want to be the last author on a paper, whereas like I'm used to kind of like in the US or Canadian system, it kind of goes by decreasing importance. So that's just little things, but probably something you want to clarify and talk about more if you're working across these kind of like research cultures. Yeah, but I hope that gives everybody enough input to be able to ask us questions later. As I said, I do think it's highly beneficial, and it's also really fun. And yeah, I've had very good experiences. I do think there's some tips and tricks to make this most successful. But yeah, I can probably speak a little bit about, as I said, the systems in Germany, in the Netherlands, and in Canada, more than some of the other countries. And yeah, hopefully that gives everybody enough information to be able to ask questions later.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And our second panelist is Dr. Sylwia Piatkowska. She is an assistant professor and the director of the International and Comparative Criminology Research and Policy Institute in the College of Criminology and Criminal Justice at Florida State University. Her research has been funded by the National Science Foundation, and her areas of research include hate crime, immigration and crime, and both international and comparative criminology.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for having me too. So much of my actually experiences really refers to Svenja too, because I am from different country. As you probably can hear, I have an accent. I came from Poland a while ago, actually 15 years ago, and I finished my PhD at SUNY at Albany. Then I moved to Old Dominion University, which is in Virginia. And finally, in 2019, I moved to Florida to FSU, and currently I am actually an associate professor, and I think they didn't update the website. But yes, so currently I'm a director of International Institute and a faculty member here at the Criminology College. So in terms of my experiences, I would say I do a lot of international research, comparative research. So I'm very familiar with data set, and my own research really reflects that. Having said that, I try to reach out to other colleagues in different countries. I think that's very important. And I kind of don't have that background where I kind of moved from one country to the other one, because I came from Poland straight to the United States. So for me, it was a little bit challenging, okay, what I should do, how I should start my collaboration, and what are the first steps. Sometimes it can be challenging because you really don't know where to reach and who you should be talking to. So like Svenja said, the provost, a chair, those people are very important because they will be very open to your suggestion, and they will reply to your email, and they will navigate you and tell you, okay, we have this and these fellowships, we have this scholarship that you can apply. We are working on this and these grants. For me, I always try to reach out them also by email, but I think it's very important to go to international conferences or even conferences in the United States or any other meetings, like even virtual meetings are important. Why? Because once you introduce yourself, you go to, let's say, certain workshop and you say, hey, I am Sylwia. I am really interested in your research on hate crime. Let's keep in touch. That really helps for me. I think that was the biggest advantage, that once people know you in person, or at least they can associate your face somehow, they are more open to work with you later on. Let's say once you send them an email and you introduce yourself and you will say, well, I was in that workshop 5 years ago or 2 years ago, let's say, maybe 5, not, but 2 years ago. Do you remember me? Maybe we can work on something together. And I think that that really helps. Another, I would say, opportunity is that you can, like currently I'm working with some scholars in the UK, and we are applying for international funding or funding from the UK. So I think it's important that you have some common interest that they will benefit somehow too. So let's say we are working on the hate crime project with scholars in the UK, and they are very interested in that too. Now we are applying for international grants or grants from British Academy. So that those grants can really help you to, let's say, financially to stay in the UK during the summer, or to travel to the UK if you need to collect any data. So I think having common interest, applying for grants that will help you financially are very important too. In terms of the challenges, so I mentioned a few of them. I think, as Svenja said, sometimes there are some differences when it comes to cultural or like language differences. So for me, it was challenging to come to the United States and to learn language and learn the culture. And I can imagine that even if I'm working currently with different scholars, there are some cultural differences too. So those could be a little bit challenging. What else here? I think that's pretty much it. And I'm sure I will have some later on, maybe some other advices, but for now, that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Sylwia. All right, and our final panelist is a literacy and pedagogy specialist with FSU's Learning Systems Institute, LSI, Dr. Adrienne Barnes-Story. She has more than 20 years of experience in both formal and non-formal education environments, education research in traditional American schools, and international education and development. Dr. Barnes-Story has supported multiple projects across several developing country contexts to design primary grade curricula, pre-service teacher training modules, and teacher stakeholder professional development materials focused on literacy-related content and evidence-based practices associated with early grade learning. Her research has taken her to multiple countries, including Ethiopia, Honduras, Malawi, Nigeria, and the Philippines. Dr. Barnes-Story, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate being invited to speak on this panel. I'm a bit of an anomaly for international development or international collaborations because I fell into international work during graduate school. My advisor asked if I wanted to deliver some teacher training, and then suddenly I was on my way to Ethiopia. I was shocked, and I had never considered working in an international setting or in a low-income context, but it was really the start of the most amazing chapter of my life. I knew no one, and I was not prepared for international development, any international collaborations. I'm a literacy and pedagogy specialist, so I was trained in, rigorous mixed method methodologies, but I wasn't trained on how to collaborate internationally. I predominantly focus on improving teacher education programs and ensuring that teacher educators and student teachers receive training in evidence-based approaches for teaching those foundational skills to children. I'm currently leading projects in Rwanda and Malawi that focused on teacher training programs. And I've begun collaborating with individuals that explore how language policies impact instruction, what are effective pedagogical practices for large classrooms. But this means that I'm always looking for funding and partnership opportunities across multiple countries. And I really agree with what the other panelists said about how it starts with an email or attending a conference, about building your network. And depending on what the purpose of your collaboration is, it might be important to explore organizations that are available that either work in that field or that work in that context that you want to go to. Building and maintaining a strong network is going to be pivotal to making sure that you get the collaborations that you want, because sometimes it is who you know. But reaching out and touching base with those people and maintaining those relationships is important because, you know, the worst thing that anyone can say is no. And anything other than that is a positive response, right? So understanding what your own goals for the collaboration are, knowing where you want to go with the collaboration, very clearly communicating that to the individuals that you're reaching out to, and being ready for any answer, I would say would be the most effective, kind of in a nutshell, methods to approaching collaboration.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So we want to have some Q&A now, and I think I'll go ahead and kick it off with a question that I've been dying to ask, and then the audience, feel free to pose questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand and we'll let you unmute and ask your question as well. And I'll go ahead and start off with this one. So no two collaborations are the same, right? And as researchers, you may find that you're collaborating with people within your field, outside of your field. Your collaborators might be researchers themselves, or they could be organizations and centers or community members in different countries. Would each of you mind sharing a bit about what types of collaborators you've worked with in the past and what those unique relationships have taught you that you'd like to share? Have you noticed key differences in relationships and how they work when your collaborator is a researcher versus a community organization? And if you don't mind, I think maybe Adrienne, could we start with you?
Sure, I was just muting myself. I realized I hadn't done so. Yeah, so I've actually collaborated with individuals, community organizations, and large development institutions. And no matter what the level, it really is about building a relationship with individuals. You want to build that network, and you want to understand different individuals' interests, their roles in the collaboration, their roles in a proposal process. And then making sure that you're setting aside time with those individuals to discuss potential research endeavors and invest the time to make sure that you understand really well what they want to get out of a collaboration and what their maybe career goals or research goals are, and how they align or fit together, dovetail with yours. Because one of the most important parts of a collaboration, in my perspective, is to ensure that you play to the strengths of each individual or each organization, right? And that you ensure that each individual or organization's scope of work is designed specifically around those strengths, and that you build into your collaboration opportunities where different partners can learn from one another.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Sylwia, would you like to chime in?
Sure. I agree with Adrienne. I think it's very important to discuss the goals that different collaborators have and what they really want to achieve by having this collaboration. I work only so far with academicians, so with individuals. And their goal is to publish, right? To do research, to investigate data sets. Very often they have different strengths than me, or I bring different strengths. So we kind of complement each other. But I think yes, so having common interest or discussing the goals is very important. Just to develop.
Yeah, and Svenja?
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and I work with researchers, kind of like university professors in different places. I also have worked with community organizations, or like in my case, sport organizations. So like German Soccer Federation, and there's a German Alpine Club. So kind of like these local stakeholders. In Vancouver is also affiliated with the YMCA because I was part of a very community engaged project. And I hadn't thought about that, I'm also part of PhD supervision committees, one in Canada, one in Germany. So there's also that kind of like collaboration on the teaching aspect. And I'm hosting a couple of German research internship students right now. So it's like, that's kind of what came to mind with the different levels. I do think also especially the community engagement, I don't think it can be done without being on the ground and building these personal relationships, which like with a researcher, you can kind of connect at a conference or even send somebody an email after you read their paper and then just set up a Zoom call. And we're so used to that level of conversation, but I don't think it would work to reach out to a community organization, just do everything online. So I think that's also where I have forged these personal relationships because I spent some of my time in Munich or was in Vancouver. I don't think I would have been able to set this up from afar. So either like being in person in that location and taking those connections with you, or having collaborators that are literally on the ground, I think would be, especially when it comes to these like the good community engagement. I think that's a big difference between the two of them. Yeah, that's probably the biggest difference I would see with those two areas of collaboration.
Yeah, and you had mentioned earlier how you often just, hey, send that email, if there's a collaborator you want to work with, just let them know,
And
hey, this is my research interest.
And I do think that also works with people in the field. And if they think your research is great or they can like see any use of it, but then I do think it takes that like to further buy-in, that like more personal connection. Whereas with researchers, you can kind of keep it digital and probably to the same effect. That's just my perception. Yeah, but I feel like you can still always start with an email.
Yeah, I'm wondering too for the full panel, how does your collaboration, how does that partnership begin? It's not always an email, like you said, sometimes you need that in-person buy-in to happen. And is there some kind of sign you look for that, okay, this is a partnership that's going to work? Is this a feeling you get? Is it something very clinical or very analytical? A place you come to and go, okay, yes, I want to partner with this person or this organization. I think this is the right match. Just whoever wants to go first. Yeah, Sylwia.
I can jump in. So I was just gonna say that I feel like I stalk people, like I do stalking first. Just to like I go on the website and see their CVs or like check the organization or the university that I would like to go and visit and maybe do a fellowship or scholarship. So if it's Oxford, I go on the website, and sociology, Oxford, that's my next goal. So I just stalk where I want to go, and also the CVs and the faculty members who I want to work with. I see their interest. If this is something that I could be also interested in, then I try to reach out, either if it's by email or in person, as I mentioned earlier. But I have to say that I mean, nobody should be discouraged, and I think Adrienne mentioned that earlier, because sometimes people can say no. Sometimes people are busy. Maybe they have different interests slightly. Usually they are busy and they will very politely say no. But that's a part of the experiences. And I remember when I was younger, when I tried to reach out and I stalk all these famous people that I really want to work with. And some of them were busy and they told me, I'm very sorry, I would love to, but I'm very busy currently. And unfortunately, I cannot work with you right now. And they were like from different countries too. And at the beginning, I was like, oh, okay. but then but that other things worked. So I think it's important to never give up really on like dream, because those will bring different opportunities too. It's very important. Just, okay, this didn't work, but it doesn't mean all the time it will not work. So just keep trying, and eventually it will work. It will bring different opportunities, different I don't know, different grants, different funding that will kind of build your career and help you to travel for free very often. So that I think is very important. Other thing, I think it's important to kind of understand the other parties too, that they have their own life, different research institutions. So perhaps you want to work very fast and publish, but they cannot because they are busy. So I think adjustment and keeping in touch and understanding that they cannot do things fast, or perhaps you cannot take too much work too at that moment, is very important to kind of understand each other in terms of the workload and the speed that you want to achieve something.
Do you want me to go next?
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Okay, so for me, it really depends on the project, right? There are some individuals and organizations that we specifically look for opportunities for us to collaborate because we work so well together and we really enjoy working together. And over the years, we've built this relationship that we know that we can trust each other. We know that if either one finds an opportunity that is a good fit for both, that we'll both come back to the other one and say, look at this. How do you feel about this? And we're also really honest about saying, no, I don't have the bandwidth to do that right now, or I'm interested, but these are my concerns, right? So building that honesty. But other times, like the opportunity dictates the need, right? So maybe it's a specific context or a specific kind of research or a specific type of activity where you have to ensure the alignment of each organization's skills and capacity, or individual skills and capacity to that specific opportunity. It's really important that the people that we work with, either as an organization or as an individual, that we ensure that our fundamental beliefs are aligned, about both like the collaboration expectations and about the project. And that you really are going to be going down the same road together with very clear expectations for each other and where you're trying to get. My personal decisions about whether or not to collaborate with a person or an institution have to do with their ability to very clearly and cohesively communicate, how well they respond to inquiries, like in a timely fashion, and how completely they respond. Do they exhibit excellent work ethic? Do I believe that I'm going to be doing more work than they are, or do they match my level of work ethic and come back to me with, when we have our meetings, do we all come with the same amount of work put into the conversation that we're having? And do I just get that really good, confident vibe in the pit of my stomach while I'm talking to them? You had mentioned earlier, is it a feeling? Sometimes, yeah, it is. And you have to go with that, because if there's something inside that just doesn't feel right, in my experience, it doesn't feel right because it's not right. And my advice would be to really dedicate some time to define where you want to take your research, why you want to take it there, so that you can articulate that to anyone that you're proposing it to or discussing it with. Get your elevator talk down. Like, think about that 3-minute conversation about what do you do, why do you do it, and where do you want to go, and who do you want to work with. And I love your idea, Sylwia, of stalking those who you want to work with. I'm not advocating stalking, right? But visit LinkedIn profiles, visit, organizational websites, read the bios of people, reach out to them and say, hey, I love what you do. Can you tell me more about what you do? Because that doesn't take anything. And people kind of say, oh, they like what I do. They want to know more about me. I've had a lot of Zoom calls with students who found me on LinkedIn and just wanted to know about the work that I do, and they just want to know, how did I get into it, or what's some advice to them. And actually, one of the individuals in my department who I absolutely adore working with came to us because she did that. She started reaching out to people and said, you know, what is this? How do you get into international development work? And ended up talking with one of my colleagues who said, we have an opening right now. Why don't you apply? So, and don't be afraid to apply for things that you don't feel like you say, here's the criteria that they want, and maybe you're right here. Go ahead and apply anyway, or go after that opportunity, because chances are the expectations way up here, there are going to be very, very, very few people that can actually meet all of that. And if you put your best foot forward and you put together a really great proposal, and you can be transparent and say, I'm not sure that we specifically address this, but this is our approach and this is how I think we can address it. You know, funders and partners, they want to see transparency in that.
That's really great. Thank you so much. Oh yeah, Svenja.
Yeah, super interesting. I'm like really inspired listening to the two of you, because I think like my approach has been very unstrategic to some extent, where it's really been about like a lot of just personal connections, where, you know, you have that chat at a conference and you kind of like put that person's on the map because they're doing something that's similar to you, or something that I'm like, that's complementary, where I'm fascinated by it. And so one thing really is also that patience, where I feel like sometimes you can't hurry along collaborations, but you need to grow into, maybe build a relationship, see each other again. And then it's like also that timing where everybody is involved and tied up in a bunch of projects already, so you just don't have that capacity, which, as you said, like doesn't mean that they're necessarily not interested in working with you, but just not the timing. So that's definitely something I've learned, where, you know, there's going to be a right time, and sometimes it takes a while, and you can still be valued colleagues, but it's just not the right time. But having that patience, and then sure enough, there's going to be an opportunity if both are interested in kind of like a student or a project or a conference or whatever presents themselves. And I also really like the point where, yes, you probably want to sell the idea to the other person, what they can get out of it and why it's interesting to them. But I do really like that idea of like, also don't be shy interviewing them for their commitment, because I mean, I also have a limited capacity of time and energy in projects, and I don't want to spend them on a collaboration where I'm doing all the work, because then I can just start the project by myself, unless of course, you need to have somebody else on paper for some reason. But I do think that's also just to like be picky in terms of collaborations, because I do think, yes, sometimes like it's very tempting to go for the big names and the big schools and all the reputation, but for on an everyday basis, I do think it's just more fun to work with people who are also engaged. It doesn't matter what they're called. And that also leads into my third point, because it's literally when I was looking to go abroad during my PhD, there were kind of two people who had published in my area, and one of them was like the big shot and the other person wasn't. And the recommendation I got was go with the person who's not the big shot, because they're actually going to do the work. They're going to be a good supervisor in that case. And that's very much been kind of like, I mean, they're going to be the big shot in a few years, and then you already have established that collaborative relationship, right? So that's definitely been something like a really good lesson I learned, kind of that, yeah, maybe go for somebody junior with potential rather than for somebody who's a big name already. And they also have more capacity to respond to their emails, right? So this is probably going to be also more in the process, a better collaboration.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. So I have plenty of more questions that I want to ask, but I wanted to pause for a moment and see, are there questions from the audience? Have questions come up from panelists for each other? Give a moment for that. Okay, because I wanted to jump on something you said earlier, Svenja, going into your research interests are centered on group dynamics and what makes groups work, what makes teams work. And so I was wondering, could you share with us from your studies and your research, what are some trends that you've seen that are sort of the secret ingredients of what make a good collaboration that we could use for ourselves as we're going and making collaborations?
Yeah, and I think it's super interesting that this literally aligns with a lot of the things we've heard already. But there's a ton of things that go into this. I do think, and I mean, we're doing this with sport teams all the time, but I think for anything, a lot of kind of like the structural, we call it the structural issues, but the things that go into working together. So a lot of having an explicit and common and maybe shared goal, but being explicit about that and not just assuming we're on the same page. I think like that's a huge thing. And with that kind of like the role distribution, role clarity piece, like who is doing what and what do they think they're doing? Are we on the same page that like everybody kind of like agrees what they're doing? So a lot of kind of like almost artificial stuff that if you spend a lot of time on this upfront, it seems super tedious. And as I said, we're seeing the same with sport teams where people are like, yeah, we got this, we don't need to talk about it. And usually it's problems arise because people are not on the same page because they have not explicitly talked about it. And I've been part of a project where we thought we talked about it and we talked about like half of it, but then we didn't. So we talked about like kind of like what everybody was doing, but we didn't talk about who was in charge. And that ended up being a huge problem going down. So kind of identifying what is our aim and making sure everybody's on the same page, identifying who is doing what, and also making sure that people are aware and actually willing to fulfill those roles. And then like the leadership component, I do think and I do think it becomes tricky if nominally everybody's an expert and on the same page, on the same level. So if you don't have this natural hierarchy, but I do think any group and any project needs, just like sometimes there need to, and it can be a democratic decision-making process, but somebody needs to initiate that. So like having some sort of leader or leadership tasks defined, I think those would be the really the three big things. So the goal setting, the roles, and the leadership.
I'm wondering, Adrienne and Sylwia, have you noticed some of these trends in your own collaborations? Do some of these things resonate for you? Whoever wants to go first. Sorry.
Okay, I can jump in. It's funny because Svenja was talking about it, and I was just thinking about my very recent collaboration that actually it's a picture of or reflection of that situation where there's no clear leadership. And the project is actually recent, but it's not recent because it's taking, I think, the last 2 years. So it's kind of long, but I think the problem with this is that there's no leadership and no clear roles. And I think the other problem there is that there's too many people. I don't know if you also had that problem before, but I found that if there is like 2, 3, 4 even people, it's okay. But once the number increases more than 4, 5, 6, then nobody's in charge, but also nobody knows what the other parties are doing. And that become really messy. So as much as I love working with so many people, I try to next time maybe limit that number. Because yes, leadership, nobody's in charge. There's no like division of the roles, who is doing what. And everybody's thinking that somebody else will do the part. I think that's the biggest, like why me? Why I should be doing? Like, I don't know if the person Z and X is what he's doing. So nobody knows what's going on. So I think that's the biggest challenge. But in terms of the leadership, I also found that the person who initiates the project is usually a leadership, and the person who organizes the emails or let's meet. So usually it's the first author in my case, but of course it can be different. I'm not saying it should be, but usually the first author has some ideas and everybody else kind of follow that, and then it can change over time, in my scenario at least. Like, listen, and on that project I'll be first and I initiate that action, and then we switch for that collaboration, let's say. So that was in my case. I'm not sure what else here I can add. I think that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. I'd say that when I'm working with particularly individuals, like obviously when you're implementing projects, there's a clear, management structure. But when I am writing or collaborating with either one or more individuals, it's really important to define those roles straight up ahead, you know. So if I approach someone and I want to write an article with them, or I want to write a paper with them, I say, okay, you know, I would like to be first author. These are the things that I would do. I'd like you to be second author. These are the expectations. I'd like you to be third author. These are the expectations for you. Or, you know, I just don't have the capacity to do first authorship, but I am interested in working on this paper. I would like to take second authorship and have you do blah, blah, whatever, right? Really clearly define those roles and expectations before you get into the thick of it, because otherwise it could come time to publish or to submit the manuscript, and then you talk about authorship. You're going to be in a lot of trouble, because everybody's going to feel like they did the most work and they deserve first authorship, or, you know, I know Svenja maybe last authorship or whatever, you know. So I think clearly defining those roles from the beginning, you know, what are they? What are the expectations? Also, have regular meetings. So my collaborators and I have weekly writing meetings, sometimes bi-weekly, depending on what the timeline is to get things done. It makes you accountable, right? Having regular meetings makes you accountable, knowing that it's on your calendar, knowing what the expectation is. And then in those regular meetings, not only talking about what you've accomplished, but talking about and creating very clear action items and timelines for the next time that you meet, what everyone's going to get accomplished before you meet again. Because you don't want a situation where you're collaborating with someone and you meet 2 weeks later and they say, oh, well, I really haven't had time to do anything. And you're like, well, I did all of this, right? And okay, if that happens once or twice, but if that keeps happening, you get frustrated and then you end up just canceling the project or canceling the work. I've done that because it's just, you know, that person is just not going to collaborate with you, and then you know that you don't want to work with them again. But if you set really clear expectations and action items and very clear timelines, I found that from the get-go, that it really reduces any instances of that happening. It improves the success rate.
That's really great. I'd like to touch on that element of being okay with canceling a collaboration. That it's not always a failure, right? To realize that something's not working and maybe this relationship isn't happening the way we need it to for the research to move forward. Are there any thoughts on that? Have you had to make that tough call before, or what advice would you give to someone who's trying to keep a collaboration going and just feeling like, oh, this is not working?
So yes, I have had to cancel. Luckily, that's been a very, very limited, and really it was only one that we were kind of far down the road. And that was a paper that we were writing together, and we had a really straight up, forward, honest, professional, heart to heart. This is what's happening. This is what I feel that I'm doing, using those I statements. This is what not accusatory. This is what I feel I'm doing. This is the lack of support that I feel like I'm getting. This is my goal for this activity. And in that instance, that author agreed, just actually suggested that she didn't need to be part of the project anymore. And that was something that she suggested after we had a lot of conversation about kind of the expectations that moving forward and where we were at. And I think like kind of earlier stage, actually just this morning, I have been talking with a few people. We were going to go for an opportunity that's available. We're, you know, kind of a couple of weeks into planning for this. And, you know, we just had a realistic talk about the expectations of the opportunity, the fact that none of us really wants to write this during Christmas break. And I said, I don't want to write the whole thing during Christmas break. So if any of you, you know, if you are not willing to really come in and put a lot of time in over the holiday, then I think that we need to make the decision to not move forward. And we made that decision today because, but like I said, that's about being transparent and just being honest with each other. And it's not about hurting each other's feelings. And you know what you can do, and be aware of what you can do. Be honest with yourself. I don't want to spend the 2 weeks of holiday break working. I didn't. Could we have done it? Absolutely, yes, we could have done it. And that, but I didn't want to. And so, be honest with yourself about what you really, really want to do. Because if you don't want to do it, then you shouldn't be doing it. Because, you know, the advice that I've read is, if the answer isn't yes, absolutely, then it's no.
That's really great. Thank you. I see we have a question in the chat. Thank you so much for chiming in. Let's see, the question says, I heard Svenja mention collaborating and taking on a teacher role. As a research assistant who is still learning, I'd like to know your approaches to be a helpful and knowledgeable research mentor. And there are a couple additions to what traits does your ideal collaborator assistant have? And can you talk a little bit about the specific research methods used in your projects? All right, so Svenja, would you like to tackle some of that?
Sure. And no, and I think the mentor piece, that's, I don't know, I don't want to say like something I still struggle with, but I also feel anybody who asks themselves that question is probably a better mentor than they think. And the people who don't ask themselves that question, if they're a good mentor, they're probably bad mentors. And I know FSU has a research mentoring academy. I saw this and I signed up for it, and that was super helpful. And it was great for many reasons, but one thing I enjoyed the most, and that's really something I've been doing, and also like with two friends from Germany, I think every month we kind of have like an hour-long call where we talk, like it's just peer feedback. So kind of like talking to others about tips and tricks and how they mentor, and just like getting like a array, but also getting feedback on some of the stuff I'm doing, where I'm like, I don't know, at a loss with a certain student or a problem or whatever it is. So that kind of peer exchange, I think, is invaluable in learning from people who are a little bit more advanced and have some of the things figured out. I thought that's very helpful. And then one thing, and that also is, I mean, I think that goes for leadership anywhere, but kind of like that level of authenticity, kind of finding your style. And then I like to be a certain type of supervisor, for example, when I'm meeting with my PhD students for 1 hour, approximately 1 hour each week. And I know a lot of other people don't do that, but that's just like, that works for me. And that's how I would like to have a relationship. I'm not saying that's like the only way and that's good. So also exploring like different ways that work for you. And I think at some point there's also that idea of fit between what type of leader or mentor you are, and then kind of like what type of followers you're a good match, or the other way around. Like if you're being mentored, not every person is going to be a good mentor to you just because they've been a good mentor to another person or student. So that's kind of on that personal level. I'm a big fan of transformational leadership as a construct. I think it's great. I like to like, that works well for me. That's something I aspire to be, but that just kind of like from that research perspective, there's like certain behaviors that kind of go along with that. And it's maybe like, I guess, a set of behaviors that has been linked to a bunch of beneficial outcomes, but that is not for everybody. But that's kind of like from a theoretical perspective and knowing this, and I'm trying to like literally enacting these behaviors, and I do little check-ins with myself. So that's more like a kind of like the nerdy research background on that. But I don't know if anybody else has like, because I'm always curious to hear that in terms of like how to be a good mentor and what even is a good mentor. I don't know.
Svenja, I love that you said the fact that you're asking says so much about
Right.
you already, right? Because I think those who actually are looking for ways to improve are actually way better than they even realize that they are. And I love that you mentioned that. Just what a great comment.
I love the fact that you are actually like spending weekly 1 hour. That's amazing. Like just having that schedule, I think it's something that I think I should implement more. Because I think that's the best way to approach that, and give the deadlines and be very strict, but also like help and spend time with the students. I think that's really amazing. I'm honest, like I think I give them more time, and then that not necessarily work very well because they cannot finish sometimes projects on time. But I think sometimes it's challenging just to be on time with everything and on the schedule. So
And it definitely is a time commitment, and that's time I can't spend on other things, 200%. And that's really, yeah, something I was also struggling with, because there just goes hours of my day and then I feel I haven't done anything, just like talk to students. But then that's kind of the supervisor I want to be, right? And then that if it comes as a cost with other things, but so I do think it's also about like finding whatever works for everybody.
That's,
And you know,
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
No, just something else that I want to throw out there for, if you're becoming a researcher, if you start mentoring others who do research, or you're developing in your career, time management is the number one skill that you have to develop. And I had a really difficult time early on trying to figure out how to get all the writing done, or how to get all, and I'd say, oh, I can't just do 30 minutes because it takes me 30 minutes to get into my groove. And you have to find what works for you, and you have to really set that time aside and protect your time to build collaborations, protect your time to speak with someone who's either mentoring you or that you are mentoring, and protect your time to talk to colleagues to ensure that what you're writing and what you're doing and the research that you're developing is of high quality and meaningful. And having those conversations, it seems like it's a waste of time, but it really is not. That's really what it's about.
And I will just add to that it's very important also to set the goals. I don't know, for 1 month, or maybe for 1 week, or even for 1 day. Like, I found it very useful recently just to write on the piece of paper, what do I want to achieve today, and the list. I will do this, and this, or during the week, what I will achieve. And then for the whole year, even, like, how many publications on average I should have. And believe me or not, if you reach at least 3/4 of that, that really feels good. But I think without those goals, it's very difficult to manage, because the time goes so fast, and then suddenly in December you're like, oh my God, what did I do this year? So I think just having a clear schedules really, really helps, and the goals on that schedule.
Are there other questions? That was a great one, Brianna. Thank you. So I have a question. FSU is not just filled with a bunch of US-born researchers and postdocs. We hire a lot of international faculty, students, postdocs who are working right here, and there are opportunities for collaborations internationally within our own backyard, within our own institution. And I wanted to ask Svenja and Sylwia, both of you came to America from other countries, from Germany and from Poland, and that's a culture shock, and just in life, but also in research, that a lot of people at FSU are experiencing. And I wonder what kind of insight you might want to share about maybe some of the challenges or opportunities you had in that transition, and maybe how we at FSU can be better collaborators with our own colleagues here.
Should I go? Okay. All right, cool. Okay, so what are the biggest challenges and advices? I would say and I always tell this to my students, as much as cliche it sounds, but just never give up. Just don't, and just keep trying. Actually, when I came to United States, believe me or not, in my whole life, during high school, and even some college, maybe I wrote 2 papers total. I'm not sure how it is in Western Europe, probably different, but in Eastern Europe, we never write essays, or if we do, it is 1 or 2. So I really struggled. And I will be honest, like, I cried during my whole graduate school every Sunday and every Saturday. until 12 p.m. No, I mean midnight, because then I realized, okay, it's midnight, I should finish something. Then I stopped crying and I actually start writing until morning. But it was challenging. Let me say that honestly, because I didn't know English very well. I still have some problems, but I didn't know the culture, but I also didn't know the system. And I look around and everybody know how to write. And since the kindergarten, that was really challenging. And I have to say a lot of crying, a lot of stressful days, but I think it's important just to have dream that you want to do, and that you will achieve sooner or later, no matter what. Having husband or someone that is around your family is really important, because when you go to other countries, things are different. People talk different, they behave different, they expect differently. There are different cultural things, like, in the United States, there are work ethics are better. So I think that's an advantage when you go to like Eastern Europe or Turkey or different countries, that you have stronger work ethics, basically, and you know the hard work and you know how to do things well. And Western education is really good in that terms, that it really brings so much value because your research papers are really strong and you know what you are talking about. So take this as an advantage when you go to other countries, that you actually know how to do things. But at the same time, be open to other people and their perceptions, and maybe they bring something that you don't see, maybe different aspect or certain things that you can learn, and just don't be afraid. And if you have a dream to go to Germany or Italy and do some fellowships and be assistant, just keep trying and just never give up. And what could happen the worst? I mean, okay, you learn, you didn't like it, you came back. That's, I think, the worst what it could be, but you learn so much stuff from that later, sooner or later, will come back to you and benefit you. It's just how they say it, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So that's my experiences. Thank you.
Yeah, super cool. And I do have to say, like, especially with FSU, is very colored because I was hired during the pandemic, and then I worked remotely from Munich for a year because I couldn't get a visa. And the never give up, that totally resonates with me, because I feel like so I got the job offer, I was super excited, and then it was like a month of like panicking every morning because I was getting some emails about like some official thing that needed to happen, where it's like, I'm not going to get this job after all because I'm missing like this one document, or I need to complete this one form. So there's a lot of like all these logistical things, and the switching costs, they're real. I'm going into my 4th year at FSU, and this is the first time I feel I'm like actually kind of like coasting. I'm not spending all this time trying to figure out who's in charge of what and how this university works. And I don't know to what extent, like, this probably is an international thing, yes, but just generally switching locations, but switching like research systems, it just takes time to be able to operate on the same level. And people who've been abroad and have been through that, they can empathize. But for example, coming here, a lot of my colleagues, and I used to be in the College of Education, right? And then we just got renamed and reintegrated. But a lot of education research is, a lot of it, not all, obviously, is very like US focused. So a lot of my colleagues had not had that experience of going abroad. So they had no idea how tough it would be to like socialize somebody into a new system. So I do think that's a little bit of a barrier where people have not been like gone through this. They sometimes don't understand what it takes and how confusing it can be and how different things are. And although I do think it's very valuable to be immersed in different systems and kind of see the good and the bad of all of them and be able to appreciate it. Sylwia was saying, kind of like the good things that you bring to the table and also the good things that you find in different systems. Like just the switching costs and getting used to it is just, it takes time. Like for me, it took time off my productivity. So I was feeling as I was failing the entire time, and really kind of like understanding, so like hanging in there, but also understanding it's not you, it's the process, right? It's not you're like failing at this and everybody got the system figured out, but like, no, it's like you're just getting used to it. It does get better. Yeah, I mean, I kind of like whatever, 4 years, but it does get better over time. So that's really something. And I feel the problem is it's so hard to anticipate because a lot of these things are implicit to a lot of people. It's not like these like clear rules, but it's just becomes apparent if you don't know who to talk to, if you're doing things differently. So in terms of like support and anticipating that, I don't even know, but it might be, I don't know, like brainstorming, just like talking to people who have come in and just getting our perspective in terms of like what the roadblocks were, and kind of keeping, I tried to do that for my PhD student, where kind of keep this like what was challenging for you, and then the next generation who comes in gets that information right off the bat. But that's really definitely some startup costs there.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's a great tip to take stock of what other people's experiences are as they're coming in, and then using that to make it a little easier for the next person, and then the next person, and just being altruistic in that way, open-minded. That's awesome. I wanted to ask another question about sustainability. And I know sometimes collaboration is something that is a short-term thing, and sometimes you're building something that needs to last. And especially in international collaborations, that sustainability can be extra tricky. And I think I'd love to start with Adrienne. I know you're working in LSI, the Learning Systems Institute. It's all about creating sustainable solutions and educational systems across the world. And I would love to know how do you make sustainability a part of your research? And then for the others who want to chime in, is sustainability important in your collaborations? And if so, how do you set a relationship up for that sustainability?
Thank you. That's a really huge aspect of international development work. I predominantly work across the African continent, and we partner with local organizations to build capacity and to improve education systems. And sustainability is huge because we're only there for a few years and then we leave, right? So to build that sustainability, we focus on developing our solutions with the partners. And I know that that sounds like obvious, but it's really common for people to say, well, we have this great idea of something that works, and let's use this framework in your cultural context, right? But it's really about designing a creative solution around the frameworks that already exist within that context and for that culture, rather than trying to force something that fits for us in the West or in the northern half of the world and the western half of the world, that really might not fit in an African context. We really work hard to understand and respect the culture, the ways of working, the priorities, and the values. And this is really any collaboration, right? So something that I learned is that, a democratic majority vote, which is what we use in the Western world, it doesn't work well in a traditionally tribal community where decisions have always been made by unanimous agreement, and that people will talk until they all come to the agreement, no matter how long that takes, right? And so if we go in saying, well, at least if the majority agrees, this is the way that we're going to go, and you force that movement using a democratic process, it only results in serious delays further down the road. So really understanding the cultural context of where you're working, and that could be a cultural context of an organization, right? Not just like a community overseas, depends on who you're collaborating with. Ground truthing assumptions. And helping, for us, it's local partners, really be aware of the context. So in one of the countries that I work in, the ministry kept telling me, the Ministry of Education kept saying, we have a single language of instruction policy. We teach this language because everybody in the country speaks that. And then we had to actually take those Ministry of Education officials and show them that people in the border communities don't actually speak that language. So they had become blind to the truths of their own country. And so just really making sure that we're not just assuming, and this goes with any collaboration, but not making assumptions. Identifying local resources, and this goes back to the existing structures that are available to address challenges and provide solutions. So we might partner with like an African Youth Corps, an African Youth Corps, which is like a Peace Corps, but like an African Youth Corps, like an organization that they're designed to do volunteer work. So we could use those as educational volunteers in our program because they're already there. It's a resource that's already local. And that makes sustainability. And then I think also ensuring that all of the local partners are open to increasing local capacity and implementing solutions and understanding the why and not just the how and the what. An example of this is in Malawi, there was an organization that came in and did like health training for local citizens, and there are these minibus drivers that are like glorified taxis, right? And they trained them that everyone has to wear a mask because of COVID. Everybody has to wear a mask when they're in the minibus, just to keep everyone safe. So they said, oh, well, we can do that. So they would rent a mask out to of someone who was riding in the minibus, and when you got done, you gave the mask back, and then the next person that got into the minibus, I rented that same mask out to the next person. That whole of like, why are we doing it was completely lost. And so when you're really looking at sustainability of partnerships and sustainability of programs, focus on the why. Why are you doing it? Why are you partnering? Why are you doing the research? Why are you in that context? Because that really drives the whole, that is the steering mechanism of the entire project and the entire collaboration.
That's great. Thank you so much. Svenja, Sylwia, are you thinking about sustainability when you create a collaboration internationally? And if so, how do you make that work?
Well, one thing I was thinking about is especially the community immersed projects. And for example, we're in Vancouver, we're running this like randomized control trial, we got external funding, and it was like a 2-year thing, and then it ended. And we were like, this was like a physical activity intervention for older adults. It was highly effective, participants loved it, and then it ended. And I wasn't the PI on the project, but I'm still bummed out about the fact that we just, went in, did stuff with this community, and then just like went out again. And I don't think that's very ethical, and I don't think that's sustainable, but I do think that's kind of how things go because the money runs out. So that's, and at the same time, you have these 2 years to collect your data and implement the study. So you don't really have time to work on anything like making this more sustainable. And then the same with the study we were doing in Germany, like it was really just like a research study with the German Soccer Federation. But they were great because they really wanted us to like feedback the results, and it was a little stressful, but they were super keen, and they were really excited about utilizing these findings. So they're like, that feeling of sustainability was much higher there. So I'm also thinking kind of does like field immersed research, and how we're in general, this doesn't apply to international collaborations only, but really this kind of like, how do we make sure that our findings, our research, and the projects we're running, those are sustainable and have a sustained impact in the field. So I think that's what like kind of resonates with me. And like, obviously internationally this probably makes it just more complicated, but also it like definitely kind of that sustained impact in the field. That's like the one connection I was seeing. And then the other is sustaining your collaborative relationships with others if they're going well. If not, great. I definitely have a project that kind of like, I'm so glad that we're kind of just like writing up the papers right now. Good. I don't want this to like continue. But with others, and I do think it's again also that patience, that there's going to be another opportunity. But one collaborator, I roped her in to be an external committee member for one of my PhD students. So that's really just like, keeping that involvement. And yeah, just like little things, going to visit and see each other, putting together a conference symposium. So kind of keeping up these points of contact where you can if things are going well, you can kind of keep that up. And I don't think you necessarily need to be working on the next paper, and the next paper, and the next paper, but just like staying connected in one way or the other, and like being, and I think like in the best case, like you just want to do the same work and continue, and like it's not even like a strategic thing where you kind of like almost just think of each other no matter what opportunity arises. But that's kind of the other piece where you can sustain these productive relationships.
Okay, so I also think if for that topic, like in terms of the collaboration, like how I can sustain my collaboration with other partners. So first, like as Svenja said, like if something works, that's fine. If it doesn't, well, I'm still in touch. I still can talk to you about. Basically, I don't really initiate or jump to another project, but I really try to finish what we have right now, because I already invest some time into that, and I would like to really finish, but not necessarily I will just maybe jump in to another project with those people. Yes, so that's very important. But of course, staying in touch with people and working on something and just communicating every once in a while, maybe in 1 month or maybe in every 2 months, is really important. Once you have those international collaborations, it's good to stay in touch. How is it going? Did you have the chance to look at this? So it's really important to at least sometimes to have a Zoom call and just to see each other face to face in addition to emails. But more broadly, I think, like, for example, we got a grant from British Academy on our hate crime victimization project. And I did the similar project for United States from National Science Foundation. And I think it's really important that you as a researcher are discovering something that it's important for the society as a whole, I would say. So hate crime is very hot, but also is a very sensitive topic. And what we can do for the society as a whole to improve the rates of hate crime, or kind of like diminish them. What we can do for the victim, how we can identify those communities that really need our help and really need some support from the government. So many times, whether it is British Academy or whether it is UK government or even United States, scholars and practitioners, policymakers, they will be interested in the project that benefit society or individuals and help to address those important issues like hate crime. So I think having projects that are designed to help people at the end of the day, it's really important in terms of I cannot say that word, in terms of that topic, sorry. But it helps to sustain that, because not only you have the push from the government and policymakers and those who are giving you money to conduct this project, but also from your colleagues who are really interested, okay, what's really going on? How we can help society, how we can improve things and reduce hate crime, or other types of issues.
What would you like to leave us with today?
So I think I said that before, never give up. Keep trying, be open-minded, be open to some challenges, but also embrace the opportunities and the things that the world gives you. I also would like to say that I learned a lot from my colleagues today, and I really appreciate that. Having schedule every week, 1 hour, or just having strong ethics, I really, really appreciate being here. So thank you. And I'm really honest about this and reaching out by email and be open-minded. Thank you so much for sharing those. I appreciate it.
I second that wholeheartedly. And again, just that opportunity. So, I mean, this has been a treat for me, but just that opportunity to talk about these types of things and having that peer exchange is super helpful. One thing I was thinking about too, so one thing definitely for me with the collaboration, it's always quality over quantity. And I know it sounds like, being picky and just like you need to be in a position to do that. But also, like, I feel like if you're picky from the start, you're going to have better collaborations that are more fruitful in the end. And I don't think collaborating for the sake of just like having it on your CV is necessarily the best strategy. So I'd rather have fewer but really solid collaborators that also then, it gets to just like the self-perpetuating relationship where it's not always work. And look, we are on the same page and it really does work out. So that's like the quality over quantity in this. I said, like, being picky. And then the other thing too, and that's the point I'm getting to, and this might be like, if things are going really well, people are going to reach out to you. So also being realistic about my capacity of what I can do, because I find it embarrassing in the best case, maybe shameful, and just really, really unpleasant to not be a good collaborator, right? That's also the other thing where I'm very tempted by all these like shiny projects and all these good things, but also that's where kind of the quality over quantity comes in, where if I already am at capacity with my collaborations, I cannot commit to a new thing, and that's sometimes sad. And yeah, but that's also something I'm learning right now, to just be mindful of my own collaborative capacities so I can and be a good collaborator and remain a good collaborator to the people I've committed to.
Thanks. This has been a really great panel for me as well. I'm so pleased to have met all of you as part of this. It's really great. And I have enjoyed everything that you said, and it's, either reinforced or expanded my own kind of perspectives on collaboration and research. And I think, my own final reflections and kind of takeaways for those who are listening is, think about what you bring to a collaboration, right? I'm going to say this, and I don't mean it in any negative way, but get over your ego, right? Be willing to accept that you have ways to improve, and reflect on the things that aren't successful, a denied grant proposal, or a manuscript idea with someone that went nowhere, or some conversations with someone that just fizzled out, right? Not necessarily what did I do wrong, but how could I have approached that in a different way that would have made it more successful? Or what could I have brought to the table that would have made that person want to collaborate with me, or could have encouraged that person to engage with me more? Be honest about our own strengths and weaknesses. And Svenja, you said be honest about your availability, right? The availability, but also have a conversation with yourself and really kind of get over the idea of whatever and say, what are my weaknesses? Because my weaknesses, that I look for people who that's their strength. And that's what really good collaborations are built on, is when you have different people that have different strengths that can come together and put their minds together and put something together that's really, really great. That's where the sum is bigger. The total is bigger than the sum of all the parts, right? Where you can come together and you can create something great. And personally, for me, I am not in my personal life an extrovert. So saying, well, get out there and stay in touch with potential collaborators and walk up to them at the workshop and in conferences and just ask them to talk to you. It took every ounce of my power to make myself do that in the beginning, because that's just not who I am. And even now, I will be at a workshop and I will have to tell myself, Adrienne, it is your job to walk around this room and talk to people and make sure that they know who you are and the kind of work that you do and the great stuff that you're doing, and that you're open to collaboration. Yeah, it's scary and it makes you vulnerable, but that's just this is part of my job. This is what I do. And when I get done, I can go shut myself in my room and not talk to anybody for an hour. So just really think about what are you doing? Be purposeful and know that if this is your career, this is what you're choosing to do. And you're capable of doing it. You're capable of doing anything you set your mind to. Just be open to opportunities, because it's a beautiful, perfect life, and you can do this.
Fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for being a part of this panel. You guys have been so inspiring for those of us who are working on international collaborations or just trying to be better collaborators with people in our own departments, I think we can all take something away from this. I'm going to post in the chat our on-demand site and our YouTube page for other workshops we've done in the past. This one as well has been recorded and will be up on both of these sites. So thank you everyone who's been here today. Thank you again to our panelists, and I hope that everyone can move forward and just make the most of your collaborations.